He was just a human waiter serving alien royalty. But when Captain Alex Mercer saw the princess's iron-bound leg, he did something no Qatari would dare. He began to dance with only his hands, telling a story of birds in flight. And the Empress watched from the shadows, her cold heart beginning to thaw at the sight of her daughter's first real smile. The Grand Imperial Palace wasn't designed for human comforts. Alex Mercer moved through corridors of polished obsidian, his footsteps silent on the cold stone. He carried a tray of steaming alien delicacies, his movements precise and economical. This was his world now. His Earth Recon uniform had been replaced by simple gray servant's robes. The captain's insignia that once marked his authority was gone. He'd commanded stealth missions across 3 star systems. Now he served meals to creatures who saw humans as primitive. Qatari society worshipped physical perfection. Their guards stood 7 feet tall, muscles coiled like steel cables. They watched everyone with flat metallic eyes. Weakness earned immediate punishment. The crack of bone against stone echoed through the halls sometimes. Alex kept his military discipline intact. He observed everything without appearing to watch. He memorized guard rotations and noted which courtiers held real influence. His earthly perspective became his only weapon here. He saw things the Qatari missed because they only valued brute strength. He made himself appear utterly subservient. His eyes stayed lowered, his voice quiet. But his mind never stopped working. He cataloged escape routes, potential weapons, vulnerabilities in their security. Every gesture was calculated. A wrong move could mean death. The risk was constant around the royal family. Serving the Empress required perfect control. One misstep, one stray glance could bring punishment. The Qatari didn't believe in second chances. Their justice was immediate and brutal. Survival meant understanding rules that were never spoken. He learned which hallways to avoid during certain hours. He discovered which foods were acceptable to serve slightly chilled. He noted which guards accepted small bribes of extra portions. His human resilience became his silent rebellion. Where Qatari warriors would break under such humiliation, Alex adapted. He found dignity in perfect service. He took pride in work done well even as a captive. This quiet defiance kept him sane. The palace operated on strict hierarchy. Blue-robed attendants served silver-robed ministers who served the gold-clad royal family. Alex occupied the lowest tier. He was property, not a person. They called him the Earth Thing when they spoke of him at all. He noticed how the Qatari moved. Their culture valued powerful, direct motion. Subtlety was seen as deception. Grace was considered weakness. They couldn't comprehend the value of indirect approaches or strategic patience. Alex began to understand their blind spots. Their obsession with physical dominance made them miss psychological nuances. They never noticed how he studied them while appearing to stare at the floor. They didn't see the intelligence behind his submission. This captivity was preparing him for something. He didn't know what yet, but his position gave him unique access to the Empire's heart. He saw the cracks in their perfect society. He witnessed the fear beneath their arrogance. The Qatari believed they had broken him. They thought they'd transformed a warrior into a servant. They didn't realize they'd placed an observer at the center of their power. Alex Mercer was learning how to change an empire from within. Princess Leia's chambers glittered with polished crystal and iridescent silks from across the empire. Sunlight streamed through arched windows, catching dust motes in the air, yet the room felt hollow, cold. It was a gilded cage built around a single flaw. The iron reinforcement rod fused to her right leg from hip to ankle. The rod defined her existence. Qatari medicine could have regrown the limb or designed a seamless prosthetic, but their culture demanded visible markers of imperfection. The cold metal against her skin served as constant reminder of her defective status. It symbolized everything their society despised: weakness, limitation, failure. She moved with careful hesitation. Each step produced a faint metallic scrape against the marble floor. The sound echoed in the vast chamber. Court physicians claimed the rod minimized her limp. It didn't. It amplified every awkward movement into public spectacle. Whispers followed her through palace corridors. Courtiers fell silent when she approached, then resumed their murmurs once she passed. They spoke of genetic corruption, of bloodline weakness, of a princess who would never rule. Their words shaped her isolation more effectively than any locked door. She watched dancing lessons in the courtyard below. Young Qatari nobles moved with powerful grace. their limbs tracing perfect arcs through the air. Leah's body remembered the desire to move like that. Her muscles recalled the impulse before the rod sent sharp pain up her leg. The longing remained buried beneath layers of resignation. The restraint wasn't merely physical. It dictated how she sat, how she stood, how she arranged herself during court functions. It determined which events she could attend and which viewing angles would hide her imperfection. The rod controlled her life more completely than any jailer. Her mother's visits reinforced the message. Empress Zyra entered without knocking, her gold-trimmed robes sweeping the floor. She never mentioned the rod, never acknowledged the awkward way Leah rose to greet her. Her cold approval focused only on academic achievements, strategic knowledge, acceptable skills. The unspoken message was clear: compensate for your defect. Become valuable despite your weakness. The palace's beauty concealed brutal principles. Marble statues depicted perfect physiques. Tapestries showed warriors overcoming weaker species. Every artistic choice reinforced social Darwinism. Those who couldn't compete deserved their fate. The system had no mercy for limitations, yet Leah's mind remained sharp behind her quiet demeanor. She devoured historical texts and tactical manuals. She observed political maneuvering with acute understanding. Her curiosity survived the constant oppression. She questioned why strength meant only physical power, why adaptation wasn't valued, why her culture feared difference. She developed secret habits. She collected illustrations of alien species that used camouflage instead of combat. She studied creatures that survived through cooperation rather than dominance. These small acts of rebellion stayed hidden beneath her compliant exterior. The rod's weight became psychological anchor. It taught her patience the other nobles would never learn. It forced her to think before moving, to calculate risks they would charge into blindly. Her limitation became unexpected advantage in strategic thinking. Her spirit weighted like banked coals. The intelligence in her eyes, the quick understanding of complex problems, the suppressed creativity, all remained hidden beneath the surface. She needed only one moment of recognition, one person who saw past the metal binding her leg. The isolation forged resilience they couldn't see. While other nobles trained with weapons, she trained her mind. While they perfected combat forms, she learned patterns of power and influence. Her value existed where they weren't looking. The spark would come from an unexpected direction. A human servant would see what Qatari eyes were trained to overlook. The dance would begin with hands instead of feet, with story instead of strength. The transformation would start where they least expected it. Alex watched the princess trace patterns on her datapad. Her fingers moved with quick intelligence the Qatari culture ignored. They saw only the iron rod on her leg. He saw a mind working behind resigned eyes. Her isolation mirrored his own captivity, just in different form. They were both prisoners of this system. He calculated the risk. Approaching royalty without summons meant punishment. The guards carried shock prods that could stop a heart. But her expression held something familiar, the look of someone who'd stopped expecting kindness. That recognition tipped his decision. His hands remembered an Earth tradition. Refugee children on Mars used hand dances when they couldn't speak the language. Fingers became birds, animals, stories without words. It required no legs, no perfect physique, just creativity and connection. He moved closer, keeping his posture subservient. His voice stayed low. "Permission to show you something, Highness?" The guards tensed but didn't intervene yet. Royal protocol allowed servants to speak when addressed first. He'd technically broken no rule. Not yet. His hands rose slowly, palms facing each other. Fingers curved into wings. They fluttered, dipped, soared in the air between them. He created a hawk hunting, then escaping, then finding its flock. The story unfolded without a single step taken. Pure upper body narrative. This defied everything Qatari culture taught. They believed strength required powerful limbs, perfect bodies, physical dominance. Here was art without movement, expression without strain. A story told through grace instead of force. The guards watched with flat eyes. They didn't understand what they were seeing. To them, it was just strange human gestures. They missed the revolution in the making, the challenge to their core beliefs about worth and ability. Leah's eyes followed his hands with sharp focus. She didn't just watch, she understood. Her own fingers twitched as if mirroring the motions. The intelligence in her gaze shifted from passive observation to active participation. She was solving the pattern, reading the story. Her first smile was a quiet thing. It didn't transform her face dramatically. Just a slight softening around the eyes, a tiny upward curve at the corners of her mouth. But it was genuine, unpracticed, the first real smile she'd likely given in years. The risk had been worth it. That small expression justified the potential punishment. He'd seen despair in her eyes that mirrored his own. Now he saw possibility, a crack in the emotional isolation they'd built around her. This was more than kindness. It was strategic intervention. He'd shown her that worth existed beyond physical perfection. That creativity could be strength. That her mind held value their culture refused to see. The guards finally stirred, moving to end the unauthorized interaction. But the moment had already happened. The connection was made. Alex lowered his hands and bowed, retreating to his prescribed distance. The dance lasted less than 2 minutes. He'd planted a seed in barren ground. The princess had tasted a different way of being. She'd experienced validation without conditions. That memory wouldn't fade easily. It would grow in the dark places of her mind. The small rebellion had begun, not with weapons or declarations, but with fingers tracing bird shapes in the air. Sometimes revolution starts quietly. Sometimes change begins with a simple human gesture where no one expects it. Empress Zira stood in the shadowed archway, her gold-embroidered robes blending with the dark stone. She'd come to check on her daughter's studies, expecting to find the usual scene of quiet resignation. Instead, she witnessed something impossible. The human servant's hands moved through the air like living creatures, telling stories without words. Her daughter watched with an intensity Zira had never seen before. Leah's entire body leaned forward, her eyes tracking every gesture. The familiar look of shame was gone. In its place shone pure focus, sharp understanding, rapid comprehension. Her fingers twitched as if trying to mirror the motions. This wasn't the passive acceptance Zira expected from her defective daughter. This was active engagement. Intellectual hunger. The Empress felt her first instinct: call the guards, punish the servant for unauthorized contact, reinforce the boundaries. But her strategic mind overrode the impulse. She watched longer. The human's movements held no threat, no disrespect. They offered something instead. A different way of communicating. A form of expression that required no physical perfection. Zira's training evaluated everything through tactical advantage. She saw how Leah's mind worked faster than it ever had during state lessons. The princess was decoding patterns, anticipating movements, understanding narrative flow. This wasn't rebellion. It was discovery. The defective label suddenly seemed inadequate, incorrect. Her daughter's face showed something else too. Not just concentration, but genuine pleasure. A slight smile touched her lips. Her shoulders relaxed from their usual defensive hunch. Zira realized with sudden clarity that she'd never seen her daughter experience joy before. The observation struck like a physical blow. The mother in her wanted to step forward and join them, to ask what story the hands were telling, to see that focused light in her daughter's eyes turn toward her. The ruler in her calculated the risks. Unconventional approaches could be dangerous. They could undermine authority, challenge tradition. She made her decision based on cold logic. If this method produced such rapid learning, it held value. If the human could draw out Leah's intelligence, he became an asset. The Empire needed sharp minds as well as strong bodies. Perhaps especially needed them. She stepped from the shadows. The guard stiffened to attention. The human servant immediately dropped his hands and bowed. Leah looked up, her expression shifting from engagement to apprehension. She expected punishment. They all did. Zira kept her voice neutral, controlled. Continue the lesson. The command surprised everyone, including herself. The guards relaxed their grip on their weapons. The human slowly straightened, watching her with cautious eyes. Leah's apprehension changed to confusion, then to dawning hope. The Empress didn't join them. She took a seat at the room's edge, folding her hands in her lap. She became an observer, a student of this strange interaction. She noted how the hand movements created patterns that told complex stories, how they required precision and practice rather than brute strength. She saw her daughter's quick understanding of spatial relationships, her ability to anticipate narrative turns. These were valuable skills for a ruler. Skills their culture had ignored in its obsession with physical perfection. The realization settled deep, a crack in decades of conditioning. This moment began something Zira couldn't yet name, a shift in perception, a questioning of fundamental principles. The mother's heart warred with the ruler's duty. The cold certainty of absolute power met the warm confusion of unexpected connection. She stayed until the lesson ended, watching her daughter learn and smile in ways she'd never imagined possible. The lessons moved to Alex's small chamber after the third session. The space was barely large enough for 3 people, with a narrow cot and a single window overlooking the training grounds. It became their secret classroom. Stone walls absorbed their quiet conversations where polished palace marble would have echoed every word. Alex taught earth dances designed for confined spaces, hand movements that told of ocean waves and desert winds, finger positions that mimicked animal forms from across human worlds. Each dance emphasized storytelling through upper body expression. They required precision, not power, control, not strength. Leah's confidence grew with each session. Her hands learned to flow like water, snap like fire, drift like leaves. She mastered complex narratives about migration patterns and seasonal changes. The iron rod on her leg became irrelevant to the art. Her mind worked faster than Alex had ever seen a Qatari think. She wasn't just learning dances. She was understanding human perspective. Zyra attended more frequently than palace protocol allowed. She sat on the edge of Alex's cot, her gold robes looking absurd in the small space. Her presence signaled dangerous interest in alien culture. An empress shouldn't spend time in a servant's room. She shouldn't watch human traditions with such focused attention. Every visit broke another unspoken rule. The kiss happened after a lesson on Earth's history of adaptation. Alex explained how humans survived ice ages and heat waves through flexibility. Zyra reached out and touched his hand in understanding. The contact lasted only a moment, but it crossed unforgivable boundaries. Prisoner and ruler, human and Qatari. Their roles prohibited such intimacy. Drax's spies watched from the training grounds below. They noted attendance patterns and session durations. They recorded who entered and exited the small chamber. The war commander built his case slowly, methodically. He collected evidence of cultural contamination. He documented unauthorized interactions between royalty and captive. Alex's role evolved beyond entertainment. He began interpreting human values through their dances. He explained how Earth societies valued diverse strengths, how engineers and artists contributed as much as soldiers, how adaptability often proved more valuable than pure power. These concepts challenged Qatari fundamental beliefs. The trio formed an unlikely alliance against centuries of tradition. Zyra brought imperial authority. Leah offered fresh perspective. Alex provided outsider wisdom. They met in the small room like conspirators planning a coup. But their revolution wasn't about weapons, it was about ideas. This intimacy threatened the foundation of Qatari power. Their system relied on rigid hierarchies and clear divisions. The empress fraternizing with a human prisoner blurred necessary lines. The defective princess learning alien arts challenged genetic purity doctrines. The human explaining alternative values undermined social order. They developed their own language of gestures and glances. A slight tilt of the head meant guards were approaching. A certain hand position signaled caution. They learned to communicate beneath the surface of words. This silent understanding deepened their connection further. The danger grew with each meeting. Drax's reports reached traditionalist nobles. Priests began questioning the Empress's commitment to purity laws. Rumors spread about human influence corrupting the royal bloodline. The small chamber became the most watched room in the palace. They continued despite the risk. The lessons became more than dance instruction. They were strategic sessions about governance, culture, and change. Alex taught while Zyra questioned and Leah synthesized. Their alliance solidified in that cramped space. Revolution incubated in a servant's room. War Commander Drax moved through ancient archives beneath the palace. His armor scraped against stone shelves holding millenniums of Qatari law. He found what he needed in the Purity Codes, Section 7, Clause 94. The law forbade contamination of the royal bloodline by inferior species. He would wield this forgotten statute like a blade. He framed Alex's influence as biological threat. His reports described human cultural practices as infection vectors. He documented every dance lesson as potential genetic contamination. The war commander's physicians wrote papers about alien thought patterns altering Qatari neural pathways. They called it cognitive pollution. Religious authorities joined his campaign. High priests declared human values heretical corruption. They preached that adaptability equaled moral weakness. Compassion represented evolutionary failure. Their sermons echoed through temple districts, warning that foreign ideas could rot Qatari society from within. Drax manipulated their warnings expertly. He fed priests selected information about Leah's progress. He framed her growing confidence as concerning behavior modification. He suggested the human was reprogramming her mind, making her less Qatari. The priests issued dire prophecies about weakness spreading through the population. His information network worked efficiently. Agents planted rumors in noble houses and military barracks. They whispered that Zira planned to name a half-human heir. They suggested genetic experiments between species. The stories grew more elaborate with each retelling. Soon even common soldiers discussed the contamination threat. Traditionalist factions mobilized quickly. Old noble families saw their privileged positions threatened. Military officers feared changes to promotion systems based purely on combat prowess. They gathered around Drax as their natural leader. He represented everything their culture valued: pure strength, uncompromising tradition, clear hierarchies. The war commander stockpiled weapons in secure locations. He diverted resources from frontier garrisons to loyal units near the capital. His recruiters targeted officers passed over for promotion due to minor physical imperfections. These soldiers felt betrayed by the system Zira seemed ready to abandon. Drax positioned himself as defender of sacred traditions. His speeches invoked ancestral warriors and eternal values. He wore antique armor during public appearances. His rhetoric focused on purity, strength, and unchanging truths. He became the symbol of everything the Qatari Empire had been for centuries. This opposition forced Zira into impossible choices. Every move toward reform strengthened Drax's position. Protecting her daughter meant endangering her empire. Maintaining stability required suppressing the very changes that might save their civilization. The conflict tore at her dual roles as mother and ruler. The struggle escalated beyond palace intrigue. Traditionalist nobles began withholding troops and taxes. Reform-minded ministers received death threats. Street fights broke out between Drax's supporters and citizens who wanted change. The Empire hadn't faced internal division like this in living memory. Drax's coalition grew more aggressive. His supporters demanded Leah's removal from succession. They called for Alex's public execution. They petitioned for Zira to undergo purity testing. The war commander carefully stayed within legal boundaries while pushing toward confrontation. Zira's intelligence network tracked his preparations. She knew about the weapon caches and troop movements. She read the reports of traditionalist gatherings. The crisis was accelerating toward inevitable collision. She had to decide how far she would go to protect her daughter's future. The conflict became cultural civil war. It wasn't about territory or resources, but the Empire's soul. Would they remain frozen in ancient traditions or evolve toward something new? The answer would determine whether Qatar survived or shattered itself against impossible ideals of perfection. The transformation began with measurable results. Leah's strategic test scores improved 40% after 3 months of hand dance lessons. Her spatial reasoning accelerated beyond palace tutors' expectations. The physical proof overcame skepticism. Alex's methods produced tangible outcomes where traditional Qatari education had failed. Zira initiated late-night discussions in her war room. Maps of forgotten battlefields covered the table between them. Alex explained human military doctrines that valued intelligence over brute force. He described how specialized roles created effective armies. Scouts, engineers, medics each contributed unique strengths. The Empress listened with strategic appreciation. He articulated resilience through diversity. Earth's history provided concrete examples. Societies that embraced different skills survived crises better than rigid hierarchies. He cited plague years where doctors proved more valuable than soldiers. Famine periods where farmers held greater worth than nobles. Each example challenged Qatari's singular focus on physical power. His Earth perspective became strategic asset. He could analyze their culture from outside their assumptions. He spotted vulnerabilities in their social structure that natives missed. Their obsession with perfection created collective blind spots. Alex's human experience let him see workarounds and alternatives. Zira recognized the pairing of qualities. His military background provided tactical credibility. His emotional intelligence offered cultural insight. This combination proved more valuable than pure Qatari strength. She began consulting him on personnel decisions and policy formulations. His advice consistently produced better outcomes. The formal appointment changed everything. Cultural advisor carried specific legal status in Qatari hierarchy. It granted access to secure briefings and policy meetings. Alex could now speak in council sessions rather than just private conversations. The title legitimized human influence within their system. This position became platform for systematic advocacy. He proposed educational reforms identifying diverse talents, suggested military restructuring to utilize different skill sets, recommended economic policies valuing various contributions. Each proposal backed with Earth historical precedents and current results from Leah's progress. He became bridge between factions. Traditionalists would listen to him when he used military analogies. Reformers responded to his human perspective. He learned to frame ideas in acceptable terminology, while shifting underlying assumptions. This dual approach allowed gradual change without immediate confrontation. His unique situation created complex vulnerabilities. As former prisoner turned advisor, he had no natural allies. His influence depended entirely on Zara's continued support. Drax's faction watched for any misstep. Traditionalists waited for him to overreach or make errors. He operated with careful precision. Every recommendation considered political ramifications. Each suggestion accounted for cultural resistance. He balanced innovation with acceptable pace of change. This cautious approach frustrated reformers but prevented immediate backlash. The role demanded constant adaptation. He adjusted his communication style for different audiences, used technical language with military commanders, employed strategic terms with nobles, maintained simple clarity with common citizens. This flexibility itself demonstrated the value of diverse approaches. His quarters became informal meeting space. Younger officers curious about human tactics visited secretly. Reform-minded ministers sought private counsel. Even some traditionalists came with discreet questions. The room that once held prisoner now hosted Empire's future. The transformation completed itself through demonstrated value. Alex's predictions proved accurate. His strategies worked. His understanding of Qatari culture deepened while maintaining outsider perspective. He earned respect through consistent results rather than demands. This new position placed him at Empire's center, while keeping him perpetually off balance. He belonged to no faction yet influenced all. He held authority without established power base. His survival depended on continued usefulness and royal protection. The advisor role became his most dangerous assignment yet. More threatening than frontline combat, more complex than stealth missions, he was changing a civilization's core beliefs while balancing on knife's edge. Every day brought new calculations, new risks, new opportunities to either transform everything or lose it all. The declaration ceremony unfolded in the Grand Plaza under Qatar's twin suns. Thousands gathered on polished stone steps that rose toward the imperial dais. The air hummed with anticipation and tension. Everyone knew this announcement would break tradition. Nobody guessed how completely. Empress Zira stepped forward without ceremony. Her voice carried across the silent crowd with trained projection. She named Princess Leia as her official successor. The words hung in the air for 3 heartbeats before reaction began. She didn't justify or explain. She simply declared, then she redefined strength. Her next sentences changed everything. She spoke of wisdom measured by strategic outcomes rather than combat victories. Courage demonstrated through moral choices instead of physical risk. Adaptability valued above rigid perfection. These qualities, she stated, would define Qatar's future leadership. The crowd fractured visibly. Traditionalists in military uniforms stood stiff and silent. Their faces showed disbelief then anger. Reform-minded citizens in scholar robes nodded slowly. Young officers glanced at each other with new calculation. The division became physical space between groups. Ancient noble families perceived immediate threat. Their privileged positions relied on physical perfection standards. Their children always qualified for elite military posts. Their genetic lines were considered purest. Leah's succession undermined their entire status system. It suggested other values might matter more than bloodline purity. Alex stood at the dais's edge in formal advisor robes. His presence signaled institutional acceptance of change. The human captive now stood beside Qatari high ministers. His appointment proved this wasn't temporary experimentation. The empire was restructuring its fundamental values. This moment crystallized the philosophical battle. It transformed theoretical debate into immediate political reality. The crowd wasn't just watching a ceremony. They were witnessing their civilization choose its future direction. The air felt charged with impending conflict. Those previously marginalized felt unexpected empowerment. Citizens with physical limitations stood straighter. Scholars and technicians exchanged significant glances. People who'd accepted their subordinate status now saw possibility. The declaration suggested their skills might hold new value. Young military officers recognized strategic advantage. They'd seen how rigid thinking lost battles against adaptable enemies. They understood that diverse skills won wars more effectively than pure strength. They began moving toward reform factions with quiet purpose. The announcement's simplicity made it more powerful. Zyra didn't argue or persuade. She stated the new reality as established fact. This approach left no room for immediate challenge. It forced everyone to react to accomplished change rather than proposed idea. Traditionalist leaders recovered from their shock. Their anger became visible in clenched fists and set jaws. They couldn't openly oppose the Empress's decree, but their body language promised future resistance. The ceremony continued while silent battle lines formed throughout the plaza. Leah stood beside her mother, the iron rod on her leg clearly visible. She didn't attempt to hide or minimize it. Her posture showed acceptance rather than shame. This visible imperfection became part of the new definition of strength. The symbol of limitation transformed into proof of adaptability. The declaration's consequences began immediately. Reform factions started organizing around the new succession. Traditionalists began plotting how to reverse it. The empire's power structure shifted like tectonic plates grinding against each other. Everyone understood this change would require confrontation. Alex watched the crowd's reactions with tactical assessment. He noted who supported immediately, who hesitated, who opposed silently. This information would shape their next moves. The declaration was only the beginning. The real struggle would come in its implementation. The ceremony ended with formal pledges of loyalty. The words sounded hollow from many mouths. The traditionalists swore allegiance while planning resistance. The reformers pledged support while calculating advantages. The empire stood united in ceremony but divided in purpose. The philosophical battle now had concrete stakes. Leah's succession wasn't theoretical possibility anymore. It was established fact that would determine Qatar's future direction. Both sides recognized they must win completely or lose everything. Compromise became impossible. The crowd dispersed with unusual quietness. People moved in distinct groups rather than mingling freely. Conversations stayed hushed and urgent. The declaration had accomplished its purpose. It forced everyone to choose sides. The empire would never be the same. The war commander appeared in the council chamber unannounced. Drax carried an ancient stone tablet under his arm, its surface carved with Qatari legal codes from their warrior past. He placed it on the polished table with deliberate force. The preservation right hadn't been invoked in 3 centuries. It allowed challenge of imperial decrees that threatened fundamental traditions. The council debate began immediately. 12 senior members sat around the obsidian table, their faces grim. This wasn't policy discussion anymore. It became philosophical battlefield for Qatar's soul. Each argument reflected deeper cultural divisions that had been building for generations. Drax presented his case with military precision. He argued physical perfection represented evolutionary superiority. He cited Qatari history of conquering weaker species. He described how their strength-based hierarchy built an empire that lasted millennia. His words appealed to tradition, pride, and fear of change. He framed adaptability as dangerous weakness. Zyra countered with cold logic. She presented data from border conflicts where adaptable tactics defeated stronger forces. She showed how diverse skills complemented each other in crisis situations. She argued that survival strength came from flexibility, not rigid perfection. Her evidence challenged their most basic assumptions about power and value. Alex observed from the shadows. He noted which military commanders supported Drax despite evidence. He saw which nobles hesitated between tradition and progress. The shifting loyalties revealed fracture lines throughout their society. This vote would determine which direction the empire would take. The debate lasted 7 hours. Voices grew raw with tension. Traditionalists invoked ancestral wisdom. Reformers cited practical results. The division cut across usual alliances. Some military officers supported change. Certain noble families defended tradition despite potential benefits. The conflict defied simple predictions. The vote came at dusk. The chamber lights glowed softly as council members raised their hands. 7 voted to uphold the succession decree. 5 voted to overturn it. The margin was closer than anyone expected. The victory felt fragile, temporary. The division ran too deep for simple resolution. This narrow win demanded immediate action. Zyra began consolidating power before the council members left the chamber. She reassigned key military posts. She shifted resource allocations to loyal regions. She knew Drax wouldn't accept legal defeat. The real conflict was just beginning. Drax's reaction confirmed her fears. He left the chamber without acknowledging the result. His supporters followed in tight formation. The legal defeat pushed him toward extra-legal options. He had weapon caches and loyal troops positioned throughout the capital. The council vote removed his final restraint. The legal system itself became battleground. Both sides now used laws as weapons rather than guides. Zyra invoked emergency powers to protect the succession. Drax's faction cited ancient rights to justify resistance. Each side claimed legal authority while preparing for conflict beyond laws. The council chamber emptied slowly. The 7 supporters gathered around Zyra to plan next steps. The 5 opponents departed with Drax to coordinate resistance. The physical separation made the division concrete. They weren't debating ideas anymore. They were organizing for confrontation. Alex watched the aftermath with tactical assessment. The close vote revealed unexpected support for change. It also showed determined opposition. The Empire was evenly divided, not overwhelmingly traditionalist. This changed strategic calculations for both sides. The legal challenge failed but achieved Drax's purpose. It forced everyone to choose sides publicly. It revealed who supported tradition versus reform. It created clear battle lines for the coming conflict. The war commander now knew exactly where his enemies stood. The preservation right became precedent for future challenges. Both sides would use legal weapons alongside military ones. The conflict would involve laws as well as soldiers. This complicated the battlefield, but also created opportunities for strategic maneuvering. The council chamber stood empty finally. The stone tablet remained on the table, its ancient words now activated for modern conflict. The legal system had been weaponized. The cultural civil war entered new phase where laws and traditions became tools of combat. The iron rod that once defined Leah's shame began its transformation in the public courtyard. She moved through a hand dance under the open sky, her arms tracing patterns that told of migratory birds crossing star systems. The metal along her leg caught the sunlight, flashing with each deliberate movement. Spectators initially watched with skeptical expressions, expecting awkwardness or limitation. They saw instead controlled grace and expressive power. Her performances converted doubt into curiosity. Crowds gathered not to mock but to understand. They watched how her hands created entire narratives without lower body movement. The artistry required precision they'd never associated with physical limitation. Their perception shifted from seeing defect to recognizing specialized skill. The transformation happened one observer at a time. Educational protocols began changing quietly. Instructors started identifying students who showed strategic thinking rather than combat prowess. They noted spatial reasoning abilities in children who couldn't meet physical standards. The system began valuing diverse talents it had previously ignored. This shift started small but spread rapidly through academic circles. The rod's meaning inverted completely. It no longer symbolized limitation but perseverance. It represented overcoming rather than being overcome. Citizens began viewing their own imperfections through this new lens. What was once shame became evidence of resilience. The symbol that condemned now inspired. Her courage created ripple effects throughout society. People with various limitations began stepping forward. A technician with limited arm mobility demonstrated innovative tool modifications. A strategist with visual impairment revealed enhanced auditory analysis skills. Each example reinforced the new values. They proved worth existed beyond physical perfection. This cultural shift accelerated beyond Drax's ability to counter. Traditionalists tried to dismiss the changes as temporary fascination. They couldn't stop the spreading recognition that diverse strength strengthened society. Their arguments against adaptability sounded increasingly hollow against visible examples. Zyra methodically normalized the transformation. She appointed advisors with non-traditional qualifications. She publicly recognized citizens who contributed through intelligence rather than strength. Each action reinforced the new paradigm. She made change visible and concrete rather than theoretical. The empire braced for coming conflict as symbols gained power. The rod became rallying point for reform factions. Traditionalists saw it as threat to their entire value system. This cultural battle proved more dangerous than military confrontation. It challenged fundamental beliefs about worth and ability. Leah's performances continued drawing larger crowds. She incorporated complex narratives about Qatari history, reinterpreted through human perspective. She showed how adaptability had always been part of their success, just unrecognized. Her art educated as well as entertained. The transformation demonstrated quiet power of visible change. People believed what they saw more than what they were told. Seeing Leah's capabilities overcome initial skepticism faster than speeches or decrees. The evidence became undeniable through demonstration. This shift threatened traditionalists more effectively than weapons. They could fight soldiers but not ideas. They could defeat armies but not changing perceptions. Their power relied on maintained beliefs rather than force alone. The crumbling of those beliefs undermined their authority fundamentally. The rod's journey from shame symbol to emblem of perseverance marked the revolution's progress. It showed how deeply culture could change when presented with alternative possibilities. The metal band that once limited a princess now represented liberation for many. Its transformation mirrored the empire's own difficult evolution toward broader definitions of strength and value. The purification arena stood silent under harsh lights. Ancient stones remembered centuries of bloodshed. This ritual allowed challenge to death for imperial leadership. Drax chose it for maximum humiliation. He wanted reformers to watch their hopes die publicly. The arena became philosophical battlefield disguised as physical combat. Two visions of Qatari future would clash here tonight. Drax entered first. His armor gleamed under the lights. He carried traditional weapons, energy blade, shock shield, nerve whip. His movements showed brute confidence. He'd chosen weapons requiring pure strength and aggression. This was his statement about true power. He believed tactical experience meant nothing against overwhelming force. Zira appeared from the opposite tunnel. She wore lighter combat gear, favoring mobility over protection. Her weapons emphasized precision, throwing blades, tactical sensors, maneuverability enhancers. Her approach demonstrated alternative combat philosophy. She would use strategy against his strength, intelligence against his aggression. Leah took position in the Imperial box. Her presence itself defied tradition. No defective heir had ever attended purification combat. The iron rod on her leg caught the light as she moved. She represented the values they fought over. Her calm observation showed courage beyond physical terms. Alex positioned himself near the combat floor. He carried no weapons but stood ready. His role was protector despite being unarmed. He watched Drax's loyalists in the crowd. He monitored for any cheating or external interference. His human perspective gave him tactical advantage they underestimated. The combat began without ceremony. Drax charged immediately. His energy blade carved through air where Zira had stood. She moved with economical precision. She used his momentum against him. Her tactics emphasized efficiency over power. Each movement demonstrated her different philosophy of strength. The crowd's allegiance shifted visibly during the fight. Traditionalists cheered Drax's powerful strikes. Reformers appreciated Zira's clever maneuvers. But some in the middle watched thoughtfully. They saw how her approach conserved energy while his wasted it. They noticed how she created opportunities instead of forcing them. This ritual tested whether new values could survive old violence. Drax fought to prove physical perfection always triumphed. Zira demonstrated that adaptability could overcome raw power. Each clash represented larger cultural conflict. The combat became living metaphor for their societal struggle. Alex watched the crowd more than the fighters. He saw young officers leaning forward during Zira's tactical moves. He noted traditionalists growing frustrated as Drax failed to land decisive blows. The audience's reaction mattered as much as the combat itself. This was performance determining political future. Drax grew increasingly aggressive as the fight continued. His attacks became less controlled. He relied on overpowering rather than outthinking. This played into Zira's strategy. She let him exhaust himself while maintaining defensive efficiency. Her approach proved mentally as well as physically superior. The outcome would determine Qatar's direction for centuries. If Drax won, they would return to rigid traditionalism. If Zira prevailed, evolution would continue. The combat represented ultimate test of whether adaptability could defeat entrenched power. Both fighters understood the stakes extended far beyond personal survival. Leah watched with intense focus. Her eyes tracked every movement. She understood the tactical nuances most spectators missed. Her presence reminded everyone what they fought about. The princess who shouldn't exist according to old values sat observing the battle for her future. Alex maintained his protective position. He intercepted several attempts by Drax's supporters to interfere. His unarmed intervention demonstrated courage that impressed neutral observers. The human showed values beyond physical combat. His actions reinforced the new definitions of strength. The combat reached critical phase. Drax's breathing grew labored. His powerful strikes came slower. Zira remained controlled and efficient. She'd conserved energy while he expended it. The philosophical difference manifested in physical reality. Strategy began overcoming brute force. The crowd's murmurs changed tone. Even traditionalists saw the shifting dynamics. Some began acknowledging Zira's tactical superiority. The realization spread that maybe their definition of strength needed expansion. The arena became classroom teaching new lessons about power. Drax made his final desperate charge. He abandoned all technique for overwhelming attack. This was the moment of truth. Would old violence crush new ideas? Or could adaptability survive the ultimate test? The Empire held its breath, waiting for the answer. Leah stepped from the Imperial box onto the combat sand. Her movement was deliberate, unhurried. The iron rod on her leg made soft scraping sounds against the arena floor. She carried no weapons, wore no armor. Her hands remained empty at her sides. This was no physical challenge. She moved toward the fighters with calm purpose. Drax paused mid-swing, his energy blade humming in the air. He watched her approach with confused aggression. This made no tactical sense. A defective heir entering combat without protection? His warrior mind couldn't process the violation of all combat logic. He lowered his weapon slightly, waiting for explanation. Her voice cut through the arena's tension. Strength isn't about domination. The words carried clear authority without raised volume. True power includes those who contribute differently. She stood between her mother and the war commander. Her posture showed no fear, only conviction. This demonstrated precisely the courage Zira had redefined as strength. Not physical risk-taking, but moral courage. The willingness to stand for principles without weapons or protection. Leah's intervention proved that valor existed beyond combat prowess. Her calm presence challenged their entire definition of bravery. Drax's confusion created tactical opening. He hesitated, uncertain how to respond to non-physical challenge. His combat training offered no solution for philosophical confrontation. The pause gave Zira opportunity to reposition. The princess's intervention provided strategic advantage through completely unexpected means. The crowd witnessed living proof of Qatar's possible future. They saw their defective heir demonstrate courage that surpassed physical combat. Her calm authority in the arena showed leadership qualities they'd never associated with imperial rule. This was the new strength Zira had advocated, moral conviction over brute force. Her action protected both her mother and Alex simultaneously. Drax couldn't attack Zira without striking the princess first. His loyalists couldn't target Alex without interrupting the dramatic moment. Leah's positioning created protective barrier through pure symbolism. The unarmed heir became shield for both her supporters. This moment validated Zira's gamble on non-traditional succession. The princess demonstrated exactly the qualities her mother had championed. Strategic thinking overtook reactive aggression. Moral authority replaced physical dominance. The arena became proving ground for their new definition of leadership. Drax recovered from his confusion with angry realization. He recognized the psychological maneuver too late. "This changes nothing," he roared, raising his weapon again. But the moment had already shifted. The crowd had seen alternative possibility. Their perception had been fundamentally altered. Leah didn't flinch at his aggression. She maintained her position between combatants. "True strength protects rather than destroys," she stated. The simplicity of her words contrasted with the complex combat maneuvers. Her message reached spectators more effectively than any dramatic fight could. The princess became instant symbol of the civilization she might lead. Her calm intervention represented inclusive leadership. Her courage demonstrated that different strengths could complement each other. Her presence proved that limitation didn't mean weakness. The iron rod on her leg became mark of perseverance rather than defect. Drax's supporters shouted for him to continue the combat. Traditionalists demanded physical resolution, but the psychological battle had already been decided. Leah's intervention changed the conflict's nature entirely. It was no longer about who could fight better, but what kind of civilization they wanted. The war commander faced impossible choice. Attacking the princess would turn the crowd against him. Backing down would acknowledge her authority. His hesitation revealed his strategic limitation. He understood combat but not leadership. He knew violence but not governance. Leah's action completed her transformation from sheltered princess to potential ruler. She'd moved from observer to participant, from symbol to active agent. Her intervention demonstrated that she understood power differently than previous generations. Her leadership would be about inclusion rather than domination. The arena fell silent again. Spectators waited for Drax's response. The war commander stood frozen, weapon raised, facing the unarmed princess. The moment stretched, heavy with significance. The Empire's future hung on what happened next. Would violence triumph over principle, or had new leadership already begun? The energy blast came from the upper tiers. One of Drax's loyalists broke arena protocol, firing a disruptor pistol toward the princess. The shot was meant for Leah, a final desperate act to eliminate the symbol of change. Alex moved before conscious thought. His military reflexes took over. He placed his body between the blast and the princess. The energy struck his shoulder. It wasn't a clean hit. Disruptor fire never is. It tore through muscle and tissue, burning as it went. The smell of seared flesh cut through the arena's charged air. Alex dropped to one knee, his hand going to the wound. Human blood, dark red and unfamiliar to most spectators, stained his advisor robes. This action demonstrated commitment beyond self-interest. He could have remained safe, could have let Qatari guards handle the threat. Instead, he took the injury himself. The choice showed his allegiance wasn't theoretical or strategic. It was personal. He protected Leah because she mattered, not because it served any plan. His wound became living proof that humans could embody Qatari strength. The crowd saw an alien species bleed for their future. They witnessed sacrifice from someone who owed them nothing. Alex had been their prisoner, their servant, their inferior. Now he bled on their sand for their princess. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The sacrifice converted theoretical alliance into blood bond. Until this moment, the human-Qatari partnership existed in speeches and policies. Now it had physical evidence. Alex's blood on the arena floor made the connection real and permanent. He wasn't just advising them anymore. He was part of them. His earthly perspective gained immediate credibility. The crowd had heard his theories about diverse strengths. They'd listened to his explanations of human values. Now they saw those values in action. Courage manifested through sacrifice, commitment demonstrated through injury. His ideas became undeniable when written in his own blood. Medical attention arrived quickly. Imperial physicians treated him on the combat sand rather than moving him. This itself made political statement. They gave a human the same care they'd give a Qatari noble. The message spread through the crowd, this being deserved protection and healing. His worth had been proven through action. His survival became metaphor for Qatar's own precarious future. The physicians worked carefully. Disruptor wounds were tricky. They continued damaging tissue after impact. The treatment required precision and patience. Alex's struggle to survive mirrored the Empire's struggle to transform. Both were painful processes with uncertain outcomes. The crowd watched the medical team work. They saw human blood staining Qatari hands. They witnessed their physicians saving an alien life. This visual demonstration of interspecies care carried more power than any speech. It showed that different beings could protect each other. That strength included protecting the vulnerable. This moment completed Alex's transformation from prisoner to partner. He'd arrived in chains, became a servant, rose to advisor. Now he lay bleeding for their cause. His journey mirrored Qatar's own evolution, from seeing difference as threat to recognizing it as strength. His blood on the sand sealed that transformation. Drax's loyalist was captured quickly. Guards dragged him from the upper tiers. His arrest showed that the old ways were losing power. The attempt to stop change through violence had instead accelerated it. Alex's sacrifice made the reform cause more powerful than ever. The physicians stabilized the wound. Alex remained conscious through the procedure. His calm endurance impressed the medical team. They'd expected panic or weakness from a human. They found instead stoic acceptance of pain. Another assumption shattered through direct experience. Leah remained beside him throughout. She ignored protocol about royal distance from bloodshed. Her hand rested on his uninjured shoulder. The princess and the human connected through shared experience of being outsiders. Now they were bound by sacrifice as well. The image would define the new Qatar. Alex's injury became turning point. The crowd's murmurs shifted from conflict to concern. Even traditionalists expressed respect for his courage. The human had proven his worth in their own terms, through willing sacrifice. He'd spoken their language of physical proof when words failed. The bleeding stopped. The physicians closed the wound. Alex rose slowly, leaning on their shoulders. He stood facing the crowd again. The injury became part of his story now, another layer in his transformation from captive to catalyst. The pain was real, but so was the purpose. The change began with a single voice from the military section. A combat engineer stood on the stone benches, his left arm ending at the elbow. "I designed the bridge that held at Tarath Gorge," he called across the arena. "These hands," he raised his prosthetic, "calculated stress points your perfect bodies couldn't break." His statement hung in the air, challenging centuries of assumption. Other voices joined from across the crowd. A logistics officer with limited vision described coordinating supply lines through asteroid fields. A communications specialist with hearing augmentation explained decoding enemy transmissions. A mechanic with respiratory limitations told of repairing engines in toxic atmospheres. Each story demonstrated contributions that physical perfection couldn't achieve alone. This chorus of personal experiences challenged the core Qatari belief system. The stories proved that diverse skills created military success. They showed that limitations often bred innovation. The crowd listened to evidence they'd previously ignored. The paradigm shifted from theoretical debate to practical demonstration. The arena's atmosphere transformed completely. The combat sand became meeting ground rather than battleground. Spectators turned toward each other instead of the central platform. They shared their own stories of overcoming limitations. The space designed for individual conflict became community gathering place. Shared recognition overwhelmed ideological divisions. Soldiers realized they'd fought beside these imperfect comrades for years. Laborers acknowledged depending on diverse skills for survival. The artificial separation between perfect and defective crumbled under weight of practical experience. They saw their interdependence for the first time. Drax's support disintegrated visibly. His traditionalist arguments sounded hollow against lived reality. His definition of strength proved inadequate for complex society. Even his loyal officers began nodding at others' stories. They'd seen these contributions firsthand but never valued them properly. The evidence became undeniable. The crowd's evolution mirrored Qatar's larger cultural transformation. What happened in the arena reflected changes occurring throughout the empire. Citizens were reevaluating worth based on actual contributions rather than physical standards. This shift had been building beneath the surface for generations. This demonstration proved change was always possible. The capacity for recognizing diverse strengths existed within their culture. It had been suppressed by rigid traditions rather than absent entirely. The people simply needed permission to acknowledge what they already knew from experience. The collective voice became a decisive factor in the philosophical conflict. The crowd's reaction determined the outcome more than the combat itself. Their shifting allegiance made Drax's position unsustainable. No ruler could maintain power against such widespread recognition of alternative values. Their participation ensured the reform movement had foundation beyond palace walls. This wasn't just imperial decree anymore. It was popular recognition of necessary change. The transformation gained legitimacy through collective acceptance rather than forced compliance. The stories continued for hours. A medic with nerve damage described developing new surgical techniques. A pilot with mobility limitations explained evasive maneuvers. Each account added to the overwhelming evidence. The arena became classroom teaching Qatar's true history of diverse contributions. Drax stood isolated on the combat sand. His warriors had abandoned his side to join the crowd. His traditionalist supporters listened with thoughtful expressions, The war commander became relic of fading ideology. His power derived from maintained beliefs that were evaporating around him. The crowd's awakening completed silently. No dramatic proclamation or violent confrontation. Just gradual recognition of truth they'd always known but never acknowledged. Their society had always depended on diverse strengths. They simply needed to stop pretending otherwise. This organic transformation ensured lasting change. Reforms imposed from above might have been reversed. Changes accepted by the people themselves would endure. The Empire's future was secured not by force but by collective understanding. The arena emptied slowly as dusk approached. Citizens departed with new perspectives, carrying changed attitudes back to their homes and workplaces. The philosophical conflict had been decided through shared experience rather than combat. Qatar's rebirth began with ordinary people recognizing extraordinary contributions in themselves and others. Zira stood over Drax's disarmed form, her boot resting lightly on his energy blade. The combat had ended not with killing blow but with strategic disablement. She'd used his aggression against him, letting him exhaust himself against her defenses. His arrogance became his undoing. She demonstrated that governance required more than violent triumph. Her victory represented moral and political achievement beyond physical combat. She addressed the silent crowd while keeping Drax pinned. "Strength serves protection, not domination," she stated. The words carried across the arena. Leadership values all contributions, not just perfect forms. This wasn't just winning a fight. It was winning the philosophical argument. The amended succession laws were announced immediately. Imperial heralds read the new codes from the combat sand. The revisions institutionalized the lessons from their struggle. They recognized diverse strengths as equally valuable. They protected citizens with limitations from discrimination. The changes made their hard-won understanding into permanent law. This transformation went beyond personal victory. It became systemic change that would outlive any single ruler. The legal framework ensured their evolution would continue. Future leaders would operate under these new principles. The Empire's structure itself had been altered to match their growing understanding of strength. Zira's leadership experience proved more decisive than combat skill. She'd used tactical knowledge rather than brute force. She demonstrated that strategic thinking outweighed physical power. This lesson would influence military training and officer selection. They would value intelligence alongside strength from now on. The resolution balanced immediate needs with long-term goals. Drax was taken into custody without execution. His supporters were offered amnesty if they accepted the new laws. This prevented further bloodshed while maintaining authority. The approach showed wisdom beyond mere victory. She emerged as ruler who evolved rather than simply conquered. Her willingness to change became her greatest strength. She'd adapted their civilization while preserving its core values. This set precedent for future leadership. Rulers would now be evaluated on adaptability as well as power. The victory established framework for continued evolution. The new laws contained provisions for regular review and adjustment. They acknowledged that understanding might continue growing. Future generations could build on this foundation. The system became designed for ongoing improvement rather than static perfection. The combat arena became symbol of transformation. The sand that witnessed their conflict would now host ceremonies celebrating diverse achievements. The space designed for testing physical strength would honor all forms of contribution. This physical change reinforced the cultural shift. Zira's approach created stability through inclusion rather than suppression. The traditionalists who accepted the new direction found places in the reformed system. Their experience and knowledge were valued alongside new perspectives. This prevented the resentment that often follows revolution. The victory proved that systems could change from within. They hadn't needed to destroy their civilization to improve it. They'd adapted its structures to better serve all citizens. This offered hope for other rigid societies facing similar evolution. The framework ensured the transformation would outlive its founders. Leah's future reign would operate under these principles. Alex's influence would be embedded in their laws. Their personal journey became institutional wisdom. This represented the most complete victory possible. They'd won the combat, the legal battle, and the cultural transformation. They'd changed minds as well as policies. The Empire could now move forward united rather than divided. The arena emptied for the final time as a combat space. The next day would begin its new purpose as place of recognition and celebration. The physical change mirrored the psychological shift throughout their civilization. The alliance formed in Zira's strategy room after the arena cleared. Maps of the Empire covered the table between them. Their trio represented integration of different perspectives, human wisdom, imperial experience, and youthful vision combined around the tactical displays. Their partnership modeled the adaptive leadership Qatar would need moving forward. Alex's earthly perspective provided alternative solutions. He suggested communication strategies that valued clarity over tradition. He proposed military reforms emphasizing specialized roles over uniform strength. His outsider viewpoint identified opportunities natives missed. His experience with human diversity informed their approach to inclusion. Zira's operational knowledge grounded their plans in reality. She understood Qatari institutions from decades of rule. She knew which changes could happen quickly and which needed gradual implementation. Her tactical experience ensured their reforms accounted for practical constraints. She balanced innovation with stability. Leah embodied the values they fought to institutionalize. Her presence reminded them why they risked everything. She asked questions that challenged assumptions about governance. Her experience with limitation provided insight into inclusive policies. She represented the future they were building. Their personal bond became foundation for political transformation. The trust they'd developed in Alex's small chamber now supported imperial policy. Their shared experience overcoming Drax created unbreakable alliance. This personal connection ensured their partnership would survive political pressures. The alliance demonstrated strength through diversity rather than purity. Their different backgrounds complemented each other. Alex provided innovation, Zira offered experience, Leah brought fresh perspective. Together they covered weaknesses and amplified strengths. This proved their philosophical argument in practice. Governing the revolution required careful balance. They implemented changes while maintaining order. Reforms happened gradually to prevent societal shock. They preserved valuable traditions while eliminating harmful ones. This approach prevented backlash and built broad support. Their daily meetings became engine of transformation. They reviewed policy changes and monitored implementation. Alex tracked cultural reactions through intelligence reports. Zira managed political resistance and noble opposition. Leah advised on educational and social reforms. The trio faced constant challenges from traditionalists. Some nobles resisted losing privileged positions. Military officers complained about changed promotion standards. They addressed each concern with tailored solutions. Some opponents received compromises, others faced firm resistance. Their success determined whether transformation became permanent. They needed to prove the new system worked better than the old. Economic indicators, military readiness, social stability all required improvement. The evidence would convince skeptics and secure their legacy. They developed communication strategies to explain changes. Public demonstrations showed diverse contributions to society. Educational programs taught new values to younger generations. Military training incorporated adaptive thinking alongside physical training. Alex's role evolved to formal ambassador position. He negotiated new relations between Earth and Qatar. His unique understanding of both cultures proved invaluable. The former prisoner now represented interspecies diplomacy. His journey completed its remarkable arc. Zira focused on institutional reforms. She restructured government to value diverse skills. She created protections for citizens with limitations. She ensured the changes would survive beyond her reign. Her legacy became the system itself. Leah prepared for future leadership. She learned statecraft from her mother and cultural wisdom from Alex. Her education combined traditional knowledge with innovative thinking. She embodied the balance between preservation and progress. Their alliance faced its first real test during border conflicts. Traditional commanders struggled against adaptive enemies. Reform-minded officers using new tactics achieved victories. These successes strengthened their position and silenced critics. The personal dynamics between them remained crucial. They maintained trust through open disagreement and mutual respect. Their differences became strengths rather than obstacles. They demonstrated that diverse leadership could govern effectively. Their partnership proved that revolution could yield stability. The empire grew stronger through inclusion rather than weaker through division. Their success would determine whether other rigid societies might follow similar evolution. The experiment in adaptive leadership began yielding positive results almost immediately. The hand dance began as a prisoner's desperate gesture. fingers tracing shapes in the air. A story told without words. That simple act contained everything Qatar needed to learn. It proved that communication didn't require physical power. That art could be strength. That limitation could breed creativity instead of shame. The principles spread through society like quiet revolution. Schools incorporated hand narratives into leadership training. Military academies taught tactical thinking through spatial puzzles. Factories valued precision work over brute force. The dance's lessons reached far beyond its original form. It became teaching tool, philosophical foundation, cultural touchstone. Storytelling and art gained recognition as vital strengths. Qatari society had valued only combat and production. Now they saw how narratives could unite people, how creativity could solve problems force couldn't. The dance demonstrated that culture itself was a strategic asset. Their civilization began valuing artists alongside warriors. This earth tradition became catalyst for systemic change. It provided alternative framework for assessing worth. Citizens started evaluating contributions rather than physical perfection. A technician's innovation became as respected as a soldier's strength. The dance's underlying philosophy reshaped their entire value system. The revolution proved cultural exchange could transform captor and captive. Alex arrived as prisoner serving meals. He left as architect of their renewal. The Qatari evolved from oppressors to partners. Their rigid system became flexible through human influence. Forced captivity yielded mutual understanding instead of destruction. Qatar's future now balances tradition with necessary adaptation. They preserve warrior heritage while embracing new strengths. Military training includes strategic thinking alongside combat drills. Education values diverse talents equally. Their culture maintains core identity while evolving beyond limitations. Human-alien relations entered entirely new phase. The former prisoner became trusted ambassador. Earth and Qatar established mutual defense agreements. Cultural exchange programs replaced suspicion with curiosity. Their relationship became model for interspecies cooperation across the sector. The empire's survival now depends on embracing diversity. Their previous isolation nearly destroyed them. Adapting to new threats required new perspectives. The hand dance symbolized their necessary evolution. They learned that homogeneity meant vulnerability, while diversity created resilience. This transformation represents evolutionary leap rather than policy change. They didn't just adjust regulations. They altered their fundamental understanding of strength and value. The shift will affect generations of Qatari development. Their civilization became more complex, more flexible, more capable of facing unknown futures. The dance's legacy becomes embedded in their renewed civilization. Children learn hand narratives alongside traditional combat forms. Military strategists study Earth history for adaptive examples. The simple gesture in a palace corridor grew into cultural foundation. What began as connection between prisoner and princess became blueprint for societal transformation. The empire that valued only perfection learned to cherish imperfection's gifts. Their strength now includes all the ways beings can contribute, not just the ways warriors can dominate. Alex Mercer arrived in chains and became a catalyst. His journey from prisoner to partner demonstrates how individual courage can reshape entire empires. Qatar's transformation proves that true strength lies in adaptability, not perfection. It thrives on empathy and the courage to redefine worth. This story challenges our deepest assumptions, how a simple human gesture in a place of rigid power can become a quiet revolution. A hand dance, an offered moment of kindness, can unravel centuries of tradition and plant the seeds of lasting change in the most unyielding systems.